Let's do this example. We're going to solve the quadratic inequality x squared minus 3x minus 10 is less than or equal to 0. So the method we're going to use to solve for this is a graphical method. So the first thing we're going to do is draw a graph of x squared minus 3x minus 10. Now I used GeoGebra so that you could see the graph clearly before I started sketching. Of course, during an exam you don't have GeoGebra, but we'll just use this for me to explain why we use the graphical method. So we can see the graph on the right. So this is a graph of y is equal to x squared minus 3x minus 10. So this here is the graph of y. Okay, now when y equals 0, as in when x squared minus 3x minus 10 equals 0, x has the values of -2 and 5. We see that here. So that is when it is equal. Okay, now what happens when it is less than 0, which is what our inequality is asking us? Remember, this is y, so now we have to find out when y is less than, because we already found when it is equal to. So when y is less than, we're looking at the part of the graph down here, because remember, this line represents y equals 0. Less than will be all those negative numbers down here. Okay, so we're looking at the part of the graph down here as highlighted. If we notice, for every single part of this graph, this blue line all down here, all the values of x are inside our roots. So all our values of x will be between -2 and 5. Every single point that is below in this line here, every single point will have a value that is between 5 and -2. So therefore our solution is -2. We have our less than or equal to sign x, another less than or equal to sign, and 5. So that means x lies between -2 and 5. So this is how we use our graphical method to solve the inequality. So now we're going to review the steps we are going to take to solve a quadratic inequality. The first step, we are going to find the roots of the quadratic. In other words, we're going to find the values of x when y is equal to 0. The same way when we were solving quadratics, we can only solve quadratics when they are equal to 0. We can only solve inequations or inequalities when the quadratic is compared to 0, meaning it's either less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, greater than 0, less than 0. So we can only do so when it is compared to 0. So that's why the roots are important. The roots tell us when it is equal to 0. So once we know what our baseline is, we can compare what happens when it's greater than, what happens when it's less than. The second step is going to sketch our graph of the quadratic. Now, we're not going to use the minimum value or the y-intercept because we do not need to know the y values. When we're solving the inequalities, they want the range of the x values. So we're only going to sketch using the roots. And the last step is we're going to determine what part of the x-axis, again, when we compare it to the roots, that the solution can be found. So we're going to determine whether it is in between the roots, whether it is outside the roots, what area of the x-axis will our solutions be found. But also keep in mind that when we sketch the graph, let's go back to step 2. When we sketch the graph, keep in mind that when the coefficient of x squared, which is a, when the coefficient of x squared is positive, our graph looks like this. And when the coefficient of x is negative, our graph looks like that. Let's keep that in mind because it would be very important. So we have an example here. 8 minus 2x minus x squared is less than or equal to 0. Okay, so let's remember step 1. we find the roots. So to find the roots again, it will be when our quadratic is equal to 0. Okay, so let us find the roots by using our solving quadratic method. A times c will be -1 times 8, which is -8. Two values of -8 when multiplied, you get -8, but when you add them, you get -2. It will be -4 and +2. So we rewrite 8 minus 4x plus 2x minus x squared equals 0. So we factor what's common to both is the highest common factor is 4. So we have 2 minus x plus highest common factor here is x. So we are left with 2 minus x. So we factorize again because 2 minus x is common. So you have 4 plus x and 2 minus x equals 0, leaving us with the roots of 4 plus x equals 0. So x is -4 and 2 minus x equals 0. So x is +2. So then our second step, we sketch. So I'm going to sketch the graph right under the equation. So I have my axes here. They're not the straightest, but they'll have to do. So we have y, and this is x. So we sketch our graph, and remember we have -4 is one of the roots, and 2 is another root. Now, the coefficient of x squared is a negative. So my graph will look like this. And let's pretend that it passed through -2 and 4. Okay, so my graph will look like this. So now we know that when y equals 0, it is -4, sorry, and 2. Now we want to know when y, which is my graph, is less than 0. Less than 0 is, let me put it in a different color, is this part of my x-axis. So we're looking at this part of my graph itself and this part of my graph. So if I had to put any point along this part here, because we're looking at y is less than 0, my values of x will be from positive to upward, because notice all my x values will be here. And if I had to look at any point here, the x values will be from -4 and below. So this part of the graph, all the x values are less than -4. And this part of the graph, all the x values are greater than 2. So how do we do the solution? So my solution will be, we have x being less than or equal to -4, union, because we are also including the set of values x is greater than or equal to 2. So this is the solution. The solution is two different sets. One set where x is less than or equal to -4, and the other set is x is greater than or equal to 2. And that's how we solve this inequality using the graphical method. So this time we have a new quadratic. Solve 3x squared plus 7x plus 2 is greater than 0. So again, when they ask us to solve, we need to find the values of x that satisfy the inequality. So our first step, step 1 again, is to find the roots. Again, the roots are when our quadratic is equal to 0. So 3x squared plus 7x plus 2 equals 0. So again, let's a times c, 3 times +2 equals 6. So two values of 6 that when you multiply, you get +6, but when you add, you get 7 is obviously 6 and 1, because 6 times 1 is 6, 6 plus 1 is 7. So we write 3x squared plus 6x plus x plus 2 equals 0. Highest common factor here is 3x, x plus 2. Highest common factor here is 1, x plus 2. So 3x plus 1 is our first factor, x plus 2 is our second factor. If 3x plus 1 times x plus 2 is 0, then 3x plus 1 equals 0, or x plus 2 equals 0, making x equal to negative a third in one case and x equals negative 2. So these are our roots. So step 2, we sketch our graph. The coefficient is positive. So our graph, actually we don't even need much of our positive because both our roots are negative. So we can put, okay, so our graph would be something like this. Very strange shape, but doesn't have to be perfect. So here would be negative 2 and negative 1/3. So we're looking at values where y is greater than 0. So here is our y, here is our x. So if this is 0, then up here is positive. So up here will be values of y that is greater than 0. So let's see the part of my graph that is positive. So that will be this one here, this section here, and this section here. So again, where do all my x-axes refer to? Where do all my x coordinates, I should say, refer to? They refer to all values here. So the longer we draw the line, the more we go less than negative 2. Any point here would have x values that would be down here. So the longer again I draw this line, the greater I go. So therefore, my solution is x is less than negative 2 and x is greater than negative a third. So these are the two solution sets that we bring together, and this is our solution for the inequality above. Now, if you think you don't have to go through all these steps, I'm telling you right now, you need to go through all these steps. This is the only way you can ensure that you get the correct solution set. So I would like you to practice it by using the exercise assigned, or you may go to your textbook and do some practice on your own.